Typically, one talks about the need to adapt to a new culture if you are an expat and you're moving somewhere. But as a full-time traveler, if you plan to country hop and stay for a while, you might be there for a month, 2 months, even several weeks, you too are going to have to acclimate to that new culture. So in today's episode, let's explore what you can expect in the acclimation process. Welcome to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. I'm your host, Heather Markell. If you're dreaming of full-time travel or moving abroad, but stuck at the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges, this podcast is for you. I'll help you trade overwhelm for information that gets you from down and stuck to up and going. You can dream about the travel lifestyle, or you can live the travel lifestyle. If you're ready to live it, then let's jump in together. Adapting to a new culture confronts you with behaviors that are so second nature to you. So there's like this internal awareness of your own self that pops out, and you don't even realize that you have these behaviors, as well as the external layers of comfort that you begin to recognize and have to change. So I've been both an expat and also country hopped a lot. So the funny thing is, even though I know this process and I'm used to it, once in a while it really hits me. So I lived in France first I lived there for a summer, and then I spent a year there, or actually a semester studying there, and then I worked there for a year. So there were layers or levels of the depth of how I acclimated to the French culture. And then after having so much experience now with all of the moving around to different places and getting used to them, I was really surprised when I went to South Korea in 2023 that culture shock really, really hit me hard. It was that, for me, the process of sort of realizing that everything I did was wrong, but I didn't quite understand how to get it right. And it was a good week before I was able to normalize behavior and then enjoy myself. So it is really important to understand what's happening, especially, I like to give, so I have the luxury of, kind of being last minute with plans. And if I really don't like somewhere, I can pick up and go. But I like to try and give every place I go at least a month, because that first week is really a lot of dealing with a lot of change, even 2 weeks. And so in today's episode, since I've spent the last 2 weeks talking about language, and I'll mention that a little bit today as well, I wanted to give you 10 areas that you can expect to adapt to, the things that are going to pop up pretty immediately that you're going to have to adapt to as you navigate what some people might call culture shock or country shock, and the differences that you're going to notice and catch up with. So the first one, language, right? So we've talked about that the past couple of weeks, but language has many layers to it. So there's the language itself. If you're listening to this, I'm assuming you speak English. If not, as a native speaker, you've learned it pretty well. But language also, in a culture, there's layers of formality. So for example, when I worked in Paris, thank God I wasn't like Emily in Paris. I actually spoke fluent French, and I understood that there's something called vous voyez, which is done with people that you're very formal with and don't know as well, or in business, and tutoyer, which is much more informal. And those layers of formality can be very, very important in different cultures. When you're talking to locals, you could insult someone if you use the wrong level of formality. So it's really important that you not just learn a few key phrases, but also find out when you use them, if there's different formalities and different conjugations of verbs that you're supposed to use when you address different people. The next big thing you'll have to adapt to is food. And so there's food like, oh, pizza's not readily available. I can't find peanut butter, those kinds of things. But then I actually find breakfast is typically the thing that's hardest to adapt to in a new culture. Now, if you're staying at an Airbnb or doing a house sit, clearly you're going to go out and buy whatever it is you're used to buying, yogurt, eggs, cereal, whatever. But if you stay at all in like a hostel or a boutique hotel where breakfast is included, then that's where you're going to suddenly be given whatever that culture eats. And I'll tell you what, in Asia, breakfast to me is more like lunch or dinner. So getting used to eating, like I was just in Taiwan, so having all those new. There goes the cat reminder on my phone. That was not an actual cat. So having all those noodles and the meat and hearty foods at breakfast time for me is a big adaptation thing. And I don't always want that much food. I'm not that hungry in the morning. So food can be a big part of getting used to a culture. The third thing that you will have to get used to as you change countries is a new currency. So there's the actual bills themselves, and this can involve colors, this can involve sizes, the symbols on the bills. I know that I've heard foreigners talk about US dollars really confuse them because they're all the same size and the same colors. So it's easy, unfortunately, to, if you're not paying attention, give away the wrong bill. So, but the other thing you have to do as a full-time traveler is change your translation, if you will, of the currency. So we're constantly, if you're budgeting, you're thinking, all right, so I'm in France, and it basically like a euro is a little less than $1. And, so if the coffee is €6, wow, that's pretty expensive. Actually, I think I said that opposite. A euro is probably more than $1 now. So, a 6 or 7 euro coffee might be $10. But you're constantly translating into your home currency to figure out if something is expensive or not, or within your budget. And then as you change currency, suddenly it's like, oh, now I'm dealing with Taiwanese dollars. What's that? Like, oh, so, 100 Taiwanese dollars is like $3. So, it's a different, it's really, I find mind jarring the first week as you reshuffle and figure out how much things cost. It is a big part of the adaptation process. The fourth thing you'll get used to is apps on your phone. As you change countries, you're going to find that there's, you might use Uber, you might use, a subway app. You might use a map app, and Google Maps works a lot of the time, but it doesn't work everywhere, and sometimes there's better things. So getting used to which apps to use in which country is another thing. You got to find out what they are and then figure out how to navigate them. And Uber's not available everywhere, right? So you might have to get a different taxi app. You might rent bikes, and then it's a different service in each country, and you have to like attach your credit card and figure out how to rent the bike. So all of these things are something that you have to get used to as you change countries. The fifth thing you'll have to get used to is time. Now, that has, of course, two components to it. There's jet lag. So depending how far you've traveled and whether it's in the same time zone or not, you may have to get used to literally like time is flowing a bit differently. And then if you meet locals, of course, there's how do they handle time? So when you make appointments with friends, are they on time? Are they late? And learning the ropes of what is expected culturally around time is another big thing. The sixth thing you'll have to get used to is how people dress. I actually find this fun, seeing how the different senses of fashion people have is I find thrilling. Like, sometimes when I go to France, I'm like, wow. I'm always kind of amazed how there's many times I've looked at women's fashion and thought that doesn't quite match, but then it kind of does. And I'm like, I don't know how they pull it off, but it's really interesting as opposed to, sweatsuit culture or t-shirts and jeans or, what's business dress, what's day-to-day dress. You go to like Thailand, you see everyone wearing I'm convinced that those pants that they sell in Thailand are like tourist pants because like all the tourists wear those fun pants, but I rarely see the locals wearing them. But so, understanding this is important because also, do you want to fit in or do you not care? Do you want to stand out? Understanding how people dress is a big part of adapting to a new country. The seventh adjustment you'll have to make is weather. And weather, you might say, well, duh, okay, Heather, obviously. So, it might be hotter, it might be colder. So obviously I have to wear a jacket or, get a tank top. Yes, true. However, I'm finding that also water intake is a big part of this. So for me, I think I've shared the story before. I was in Turkey in August of 2024 and ended up hospitalized for dehydration. So don't underestimate the power of drinking water. And especially if you're going somewhere that's super hot, make sure that you have that water. I actually now carry electrolytes as well. So you might usually the local pharmacy or like a 7-Eleven or whatever their version of it is will have some sort of electrolyte substance or drink or Gatorade or something like that. So you might want to familiarize yourself with which stores carry that, where you can get it. Even when I was in Taiwan, it was really hot. I mean, November, it was really hot. I actually also found, going back to food, fruits and vegetables, if you're not doing your own cooking, are less available, at least in some places, like especially in Taiwan and some Asian countries. I just found they were not as part of a meal as I'm used to. And so a few days in, I realized I'm feeling really depleted, and I went and bought an orange juice. And I realized a lot of the time when I'm feeling kind of a little out of whack, I need that fruit. So, and I had some orange juice, and that really helped. So, the weather, will go back to the food and the water. So all of this kind of plays together as you acclimate to a new place. The eighth adjustment you'll have to make is subway etiquette. Now, clearly, this is only where there is a subway or a metro, but, I find it fascinating how differently people behave in subways. So, for example, I'm from New York City, and there is no etiquette. Basically, you can arrive at the station and wait 10 bloody minutes or 15 bloody minutes for a subway. And by the time it comes, the platform is so full of people. Like, you got there and you're like the first one there. And now you can barely hold your ground because the platform is so full. And guess what? Nobody cares that you were there the longest. Everyone's going to shove in and they don't care. Like, that everybody wants to get on that subway car. Whereas in parts of Asia, like Japan, like Taiwan, you line up, and that's taken pretty seriously. And I've seen it even on regular trains, where lines, like commuter trains, where lines can be really, really long. They obey the line. Like, people get on the back of the line. They don't play dumb. They all do that. Given that there are certain leeway for the elderly and people with kids, but apart from that, understanding when, you're supposed to culturally line up. Also in a subway, are people looking at each other? Are they, head down? Things like that. So subway etiquette is really important, which leads to the ninth thing that you will have to get used to, which is eye contact and personal space. Now, even in the age of cell phones, where everyone does appear to be looking at their cell phones and not each other, I will say in Paris, I have repeatedly felt like my shoes were bad. I don't know. I find people stare at my shoes. So, and then sometimes in Paris too, I find like men, will look at you and just keep staring at you. Like they're not, if you make eye contact with them, they don't look away. Whereas some cultures, you make eye contact with someone and then they instantly look away. So it's really interesting getting used to how people handle that in different contexts. And then there's the personal space. Generally speaking, when you meet someone, are they kind of like so close to you, you feel like you're squished in an elevator, except that there's tons of space around you? Or is there sort of an understanding? Do you each have the same level of personal space? So again, this is something that you'll have to get used to. And the 10th thing that you will need to adapt to, and the final one, there's so many other things, but I just wanted to keep this episode from becoming an hour long. So politeness is another thing you'll have to get used to, and that comes in with like direct and indirect communication. And I think obviously that's down to us as individuals, but also in different cultures. It's getting used to the way local people communicate things is really important. So, in business, look, Americans tend to be very much like, our product is the best and here's why and you should buy it, which is a real turnoff to many other cultures. And then I've noticed sometimes that, in Asia, when somebody is, let's say, not going to buy your product or doesn't want to hang out with you or whatever it is, they might say, oh my God, I love your product. Yeah, I'm really interested. And in fact, they just don't say no. It's getting used to, sometimes politeness is just that. It's a polite way of saying no, but you're not hearing it because in your culture, the words they're saying sound very much like a sale or like a yes. So you have to pay attention to that. And also, like in the Netherlands, I find people are very, very direct. And sometimes if you're not used to that, you may feel insulted, but they're just being direct. So again, getting used to those styles of communication is a big, big part of adapting to new countries. So I hope that was helpful. That is, I just think that this is some really important stuff that you will have to deal with as you are changing countries. And these things impact your mood. The first week that I'm in a new place, sometimes, like I mentioned in South Korea, I found these things overwhelming. When I got hospitalized for dehydration because of the warm weather and not drinking enough water, that was a real bummer. So, and sometimes it's funny, right? Sometimes you get to see yourself, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, as you go through these things, you notice the differences. You see, you're the constant, so you start noticing like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I even did this or thought this. That's when these secret underlying thoughts and behaviors that you have pop out, and you gain a lot of self-awareness through this process. So thank you for listening again. And as always, if you are curious about traveling more, check out the Full-Time Travel Academy. I'm also going to be adding a new quiz soon, so stay tuned, and I will talk to you on next week's episode. Have a great week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. If you loved it, please leave a review and let us know. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. Check out the show notes for important resources related to this episode, and come visit us at travellifestylecoach.com to learn more great information. If you're ready to get started with the lifestyle, go to moneyfortravelbootcamp.com, where you can learn all the strategies to afford this amazing lifestyle. Talk to you next week.